I was at the library yesterday picking up books, like the little book gnome that I am, when my wife picked up Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz and placed it into my hands. I had just finished The Extinction of Arena Ray by Jennifer Croft. Interesting book, very interesting, but by no means like a light read. And so when I read the blurb about this being a cozy sci-fi kind of nice community-focused story, I was really into that idea. So I checked it out and I read it and I finished it, and I cannot stop thinking about this book, but I don't think I'm thinking about things the way that the author intended me to think about them. And I just had to make this video. I'm very interested in the moral backdrop of this story and the author and things like that, because I just don't understand what this book is trying to do in the way that it is presenting itself to me. Why this? Why now? Title of the video. I don't know. Probably not. So this book is about a group of previously enslaved but human intelligence equivalent robots. They used to be enslaved by the United States, and then they were liberated by a civil war between California and the United States. But they still don't have as many rights, even in California, as humans do. These robots come back online. They're in a bombed out kind of quasi-ruined, partially rebuilt version of San Francisco. They realize that the ghost kitchen company that used to employ them has gone defunct in a crypto scam, and they decide, hey, why don't we take over control of the restaurant on our own terms, start making noodles, have a great time. They start doing this. Their shop gets hit with a wave of 1-star reviews from robophobes, who are basically upset that robots are making food for humans instead of humans. I wonder what this could be related to in 2026. And they need to call upon their community for support and help, and overcome their own personal obstacles to persist, quote, in a world that wasn't built for them. If this sounds interesting to you, quit this video, head to your library, check it out, read it. It's only like 160 pages. You can get through this super fast, and then you can come back and listen to the words that I have to spill from my mouth hole, because this is going to have a lot of spoilers. I'm going to talk a lot about events that happen in this book to justify the way that I'm currently thinking about it. So just for a little bit of context, I've been known to read a book or two in my life. As a high school English and psychology teacher, I'm always kind of on the look for new books, especially in the sci-fi genre, and especially by authors that we would call non-standard canon authors. Particularly with sci-fi, I teach a year-long unit in early high school on sci-fi, and that unit can get really bogged down in like really negative and intense themes. There's a lot of crazy intense and negative themes in sci-fi, but also a lot of beautiful stuff. And so I'm always on the lookout for cool, short, new books in this genre that I can share and teach with my students. So I didn't know anything about the author, Annalee Newitz, before I started reading this book, and I still don't know very much about them. I've looked at a few interviews, I've looked at their Instagram and a couple other things to try and get to understand what this author does and what they're known for. I did, however, see the plethora of blurbs from Martha Wells and Becky Chambers and Mike Chen and Samit Basu and all of these authors who I respect on a very real level, and was really excited to pick this up. There's a lot of back cover extolation of the virtues of this book. A lot of big cosigns. Last chance for spoilers. All right. At the very, very start of this book, there are a couple of epigraphs. One that is a dedication from the author, and one that's a quote from Frederick Jameson, who is an American Marxist political theorist and literary philosopher, all kinds of stuff. He died in 2024, unfortunately. I want to focus on these two epigraphs because I think together they both set up something that I was expecting for the novel, and do it in a way that's really, really cool, and also a way that's incredibly frustrating and kind of annihilates a lot of the way that I'm able to engage with the themes of the novel. The dedication page reads, "For San Francisco, the city that saved my life and all the people I've loved there." So bunch of themes injected immediately just in the dedication. Here are a few of those. If you're confused about how we kind of immediately get there and not sure how you are supposed to use the funds of knowledge that you have to arrive at these, leave a comment. I'm sure we can have a nice discussion about that. But I'm just gonna go forward. The quotation from Jameson, though, I think is a little bit more open-ended in how we're supposed to understand this. And it says, if everything means something else, then so does technology. I don't think Jameson is really the point of this story. I think it's interesting that he's a Marxist political theorist, and that is being used as a quotation to start this particular story. The main thing I want to point out here is that he's saying, if everything means something else, then so does technology. And I'm taking that to mean Newitz is trying to make us understand that technology, robots, all kinds of stuff in this novel are being used as a stand-in for something else. Okay? If everything means something else, then so does technology. So what does technology mean or stand for in this book? Basically, Newitz is setting us up even before the first page to be looking for that. Technology equals X. What is X? Let's find out. So right away in the flooded and run-down restaurant, we're introduced to Stay Behind. He's a security bot that deals with PTSD. This PTSD comes from serving in the war, the Civil War between California and the United States. We're also introduced to Sweetie, an anthropomorphic robot from the waist up who looks like a human female from the waist up but has these 3 robotic legs that she skates around on. We've also got Cayenne, who's kind of an octopus robot that uses a device called a nosy mouth to give him olfactory senses and taste and things like that. So very helpful when you're trying to make a restaurant. Also helpful doing search and rescue during the war, which is what he used to do. And we also have Hands, a pair of hands that find meaning in cooking. Hands is a great character. Love Hands. And so most of these character details come through backstories or flashbacks or things like that, which I don't normally love, but I think in this style of cozy, fast-paced read, it works really well. Stay Behind wakes up in emergency mode, which is the first reference that we get to his character dealing with PTSD. He panics that he doesn't have a connection to command. He goes through these attack possibilities. Was it a drone strike? Was it this? Was it that? And eventually, as it says, reminds himself for the 5,275th time in the past 1,622 days that the war is over. Very, very clear. He's dealing with some stuff. He wakes up all the bots. They have a conversation about working the restaurant themselves. Everyone talks about pitching in Ethereum, the cryptocurrency, to get the restaurant up and off the ground. And it's explained that the bots can only use Ethereum because they are not allowed to open bank accounts because they're robots, not humans. It's explained that California fought a civil war against the rest of the United States because of robot discrimination. That is the one cause and effect of the war. California wanted to give robots more rights, and the US apparently didn't like that. They fought a civil war, and that's why there are a lot of robots in California, especially these human equivalent intelligence robots, HEEI, which I think is the author trying to get around the stigma that AI currently has about these aren't AI, they're HEEI, which is human equivalent intelligence, which I don't think works, and we'll come back to that later. So the fact that robots are still othered, even in the country that fought for their rights, is, I think, a really interesting thematic idea. It doesn't get developed too much, but I think that there's an interesting analog about post-war or post-civil rights conflicts leading to certain things happening, but still not giving those people or those factions, populations, the amount of rights that they are inherently asking for. I don't want to give an entire plot summary of the book. A lot of the smaller happenings are going to come out in my analysis later, but I need to tell you about 3 things for you to understand the main crux or conflict at the core of this novel. Those 3 things are the character of Robles, the human character in the book. There's the store, Authentic Noodle itself, and there is the character of Susie Q. So right as the bots are deciding to get set up, they're visited by the human Robles, who shows up coughing and starving. He explains that he's been living in the tunnels under the city because, quote, the storms have been so bad. So a little bit of environmental devastation commentary in there too. He spends a few days healing and eating some food in the restaurant as the robots kind of get things up to snuff and take care of him. And doing this all while occasionally hitting a weed vape. He continues to do this for the rest of the novel. Cool guy. Seems like a nice guy. They're planning their new restaurant, and they decide to focus on Bang Bang noodles from the Guangzhou region of China, and they call the restaurant Authentic Noodle. Robles, again, the only human character, hears this and says, quote, "Authentic sounds like a nationalist thing. The president, I mean the one in Yankee Land, he's always talking about authenticity as a thing we lost. Shaking his head as if clearing away memories of America, Robles started again, a thing they lost because of immigrants. Hold on to that. They open the restaurant and they get only good reviews. Everyone's raving about it. Everyone loves it. Getting a lot of online orders, a lot of gig drivers on Lime bikes showing up for that pickup, until one person named Susie Q leaves a very negative review, and it starts a chain of negative 1-star reviews. All of these reviews are very robophobic in nature, saying machines will poison people. They have robot grease, like a lot of interesting talking points that seem a little familiar, but not in the way that I thought the story was going with them. This heavily impacts our protagonists, especially Hans. You know, they are the one doing all the noodle pulling, so Hans is very affected by this. And this is the main conflict of the story. Stay Behind decides to start investigating the person who left the original review, and basically finds out that the 1-star reviews are coming from sock puppet accounts that are controlled by someone in America. It's essentially a coordinated disinformation psyop from America. And it's meant to specifically destroy this one restaurant and show that there are far more people who are against robots taking human jobs, whatever the analog is supposed to be there, than there are for them. You know, more robophobic people than pro-robo people. By the end of the story, though, the robots have discovered they can put a sign outside. They can put a sign outside their door and rely on word of mouth, and it's even more popular than what they were doing with the algorithmically controlled Grando Sando food net thing. But even at the end of the book, Stay Behind is still in the the Discord. He's still in the chat room with Susie Q. And he's still engaging and replying and even commenting that, quote, the sock puppet accounts cheered her comment about robots seeming to have more rights than people on, but so did the actual humans, whose numbers had ticked up slightly. Stay Behind, still snug in his own sock puppet account, sent a thumbs up emote and waited. He would be staying behind on the server to keep tabs on her progress and lead the counterinsurgency from within. So without getting into anything else in the story right off the bat, this kind of feels like the wrong conflict for the book for a number of reasons, particularly because of the cozy nature of it, but also because the way that it's presenting this conflict directly relates to the quote from Frederick Jameson that we had at the start of the book. Because of this framing of authentic being so inextricably tied by the characters to this anti-immigrant sentiment in America, Newitz seems to be forcing us as readers to finish the "if everything means something else, then so does technology" quote with "technology means immigration," or "technology means immigrants" specifically. And this is reinforced by trolls, making fun of the name Authentic Noodle and replacing authentic with Automatic Noodle and trying to make, jokes and stickers and merch off of that. With this framing, everything about this story that could be an interesting look at kind of like near future robopolitics and technopolitics kind of becomes this extended analogy about immigration that it just doesn't work. It just does not work. I don't know who needs to hear this. It might be Annalee Newitz, but robots aren't people. Okay, just robots aren't people. It's incredibly difficult for me in 2026 with everything that's going on with LLMs and AI and this ubiquity of it all to read what is supposed to be this cozy, heartwarming read and have all of the coziness be supplied by LLM technology and artificial intelligence and cryptocurrencies, even if no LLMs are actually used in the making of the story. Newitz is an author. I'm assuming they're against AI in writing in some ways. It just doesn't feel like this book is actually advocating for that position. A lot of people are familiar with Aristotle's 3 branches of rhetoric. You got your logos, your ethos, your pathos, the core 3 in that triangle. But there's a secret 4th one that's called kairos that refers to the occasion or the appropriateness of a specific speech or text. If people are talking about wanting gun control right in the aftermath of a mass casualty event, that would make sense because it's the kairotic moment to talk about that. We have this incredibly tragic emotional thing that happened in the public zeitgeist, and now we are trying to actually do something about it. It's the right time to do that. I think that even if you really enjoy most or all of this story, you can't really argue with the idea that in 2026, the kairos of trying to make a cozy read about robophobic discrimination and try to position that as like an analog to anti-immigrant sentiment is a little bit hard to stomach. And this, in essence, is kind of the core of this whatever I'm doing right now. This is not the moment for this book. And I'm shocked that it has so many positive reviews in light of that. So I wanted to figure out why Newitz wanted to position this story in this way. So I looked up a few interviews. In an interview with KQED, Newitz said that, quote, robots are such a useful metaphor. When we talk about AI or robots, it's often really a metaphor for how we think about people who are different from us. First off, no. I don't think I should be the one to explain this to a science journalist, but no. The way I feel about robots and automation taking human jobs and stripping everything that makes the human creative process exciting from art and literature and music and things like that, it's not analogous to the way I feel about people who have been othered from me, either by myself or society. Newitz continues by saying that they wanted to, quote, tell a story where robots have humble aspirations and just want to be good neighbors, because stories about robots can be a test bed for how we think about welcoming new arrivals to our country, our neighborhoods, and communities. By telling stories about acceptance, about how these new arrivals are just trying to make a living and have some fun, we integrate the idea that strangers can be friends. They're not here to take our jobs. They're here to enhance our lives, maybe by making us tasty noodles. No, I think this quote right here is kind of key to understanding why this story is presented in the way that it is. All of the immigrants, we get the job done, kind of like Hamilton-esque rhetoric has kind of been spilling from these think tanks. I don't even know if I would call them think tanks. These areas of society that also post tweets about who else is going to pick your strawberries? This is why ice is bad. I hate that type of argument. I hate it so much. This way of like wokely seeing immigrants as less than yourself. They do the dirty work. Why? Why is society the way that is? Like, why have we made it a necessity for neoliberal politics to have immigrants being exploited for their labor? But wokely. Are you gonna do the hard job? I'm not gonna do the hard job. Even if this is just a minor premise in this book, it's the backdrop. Newitz is saying that we shouldn't be scared of AI just like we shouldn't be scared of immigrants. But immigration challenges are so far removed from the havoc that AI and LLM technology are currently wreaking on art and information and disinformation and social structures that I have functionally no idea how Newitz could have made this Herculean leap in logic to say that this story would be a great way to recontextualize our current anti-immigration social moment. Dude, you're a writer. You're a writer. How are you making this book? How are you cool with LLM technology featuring so prominently in your work? In your cozy, heartwarming work. This makes all of these crypto references, all of the robophobia, all of the authenticity conversation, quite seriously, every single theme that could possibly be developed here falls so flat that it's kind of grotesque. Even though the book makes comments about crypto rug pulls, for instance, the rug pull, destroyed the ghost kitchen company that they were working for previously. The companies also talked about like they were pure evil. Like they made ghost kitchen after ghost kitchen after ghost kitchen, just like recycling ideas as reviews tanked the previous ones just so that they could stay in business and keep scamming people out of low quality food. They're keeping the heroic, protagonist robots deactivated in the restaurant, in a flooding restaurant for months on end. And they weren't smart enough to see the crypto scam coming. And at the same time, these characters are constantly using Ethereum as a stable enough currency to build their entire business on it. So is crypto bad, or is it a really good thing that allows this minority immigrant community to sustain itself? Like, all the coziness comes from crypto, baby. It's all crypto. Robles makes a comment in a group chat with the robots that, holy shit, you guys talk so fast. I understand robots are faster than humans. We have computers. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is LLM stuff, but the way that these robots chat, the way they automatically title conversations, the way that they immediately update information and have this kind of background access to explain their thinking of how they're upgrading information. Oh, this character's name is now this character when they decide that they've changed their preferred name, for instance. It's all making this world run. Everything about the way that their conversations are presented are directly analogous to our current understanding of like how ChatGPT works, how Claude works, how cozy, right? Says the author, working in a medium that is being scraped day in and day out by LLM slop. If you Google any question that you have about this book, hey, how many legs did Sweetie have? How many, just specific things from the text, it will tell you everything because this book has already been scraped and added to these AI databases. The entire book. Cozy. There's a whole bunch of other stuff here that just felt underdeveloped to the point of really detracting from the story. Stay behind, the PTSD feeling robot has one conversation with one of his friends that allows him to actually move this memory that's been tormenting him out of his RAM essentially into long-term storage. Sweetie realizes that she doesn't want to hide being a robot anymore after sustaining an injury to her head that leaves her metal skull exposed. And so she specifically goes to a bot shop run by her friend. She goes there specifically to get her breasts and nipples removed because, as she says, quote, she wanted to remove another pointless human feature, and they were just for show, which always seemed creepy. I totally agree. I think it's really weird for humans to be making every robot that interfaces with humans a very anthropomorphic or personified idea of what that should be. All these LLM chatbots being super agreeable and like, whoa, this is really interesting. I never thought of it that way. Let me adjust. Hey, what do you think about what I just said? This weird, like this hyper conversationalist style, or all these robots coming out that are very humanoid, very anthropomorphic, especially down to like how this story is talking about it being manufactured to be feminine for, the male gaze for sexual desire. Completely agree. Weird as hell. So why does this chapter start and end where it does? I mean, we have to go back to the epigraphs for this one, I think. Going back to San Francisco, queer history, LGBTQ rights, counterculture, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Sweetie is trans. Gender ostensibly has a different meaning for robots. I mean, hands exclusively goes by they, them, for example, and Sweetie never changes her, she, her pronouns after she has this, breast removal surgery. See, anthropomorphizing, but this scene is definitely here as gender-affirming allegory. Sweetie decides on an LED light string for the scar that runs across her chest. This very common example of, scars not being this thing that you want to hide, but something that's beautiful. This thing that you really want to embrace because it's who you truly are. I love it. I think that's a really, really cool idea and a really good way to use that in kind of like a technologic slant, right? To talk about gender identity. Love it. But Sweetie almost instantly after this gets mistaken for a human. Like in the same chapter, nothing happens between these. She leaves, goes to another thing, gets mistaken for a human. She goes to the store, there's a human behind the desk, and the human says, quote, "Oh, I love your implants. That's so cool. It looks like there's a bot erupting out of your skull." The book then says that Sweetie, quote, "rolled her eyes, a human gesture to make the point that she wasn't human." Contradictions kind of seem to be the name of the game here. I'm a big fan of contradictions in work, big fan of tension. Love the way that we can analyze that from multiple angles. Identity is a complex thing to work through. It's very complex, very complicated. I totally get that. But for a robot that's trying to embrace the fact that they are a robot and they're not a human, and have said that they are tired of wearing their human camouflage, why are we having this triumphant end of chapter moment be kind of kneecapped by her immediately being mistaken for a human? Or at least not being able to connect that to a broader theme of that frustration or that impetus that actually brought Sweetie to that place to get her breasts removed. The clerk essentially starts stammering out sorries, and Sweetie just kind of jets out of there. As the book says, quote, to not hear the rest of the cringe. There are many pieces out there that tell you how to correct yourself when you misgender someone or, mishuman them. And I think this is kind of showing like, hey, don't like stammer out apologies. Don't make it like this big deal. Just say, oh, I'm sorry, and then correct yourself. Earlier in the chapter, Sweetie, when she's going to get this done, she's going to her friend Lala, and she goes in the door and says, hey, Lala, what's up? And Lala says, I don't use Lala anymore. It's Lemon now. And immediately, Sweetie says, dictionary update, Lala is now Lemon. Lemon, it suits you. The way that these things are presented next to each other, I can't see this as anything other than gender affirming allegory, right? Because of these gender affirmation analogs, it's really hard for me to see this as anything other than commentary on misgendering someone, which is fine. But it doesn't feel like that has a lot of purpose in the story other than being this manifestation of San Francisco queer literature, counterculture. I'm not a human, I'm a robot, and I'm happy in that identity. The immigration and othering angle kind of still works. I mean, we can talk about how dominant culture co-ops minority culture for, cachet points, all that kind of stuff, in a very culturally appropriative way. But if that was the case, I don't think Sweetie would have made such a big point to specifically remove her breasts. She has an entire human torso. And so the chapter ends with Sweetie having the thought that, quote, humans couldn't imagine nakedness as truth. They needed adornment. Which really could be a neat muse if there was something else in the story that actually resonated with that idea. And I think there could have been. Let's rewind. Right after these 1-star reviews start rolling in, Hans gets really in their head and says they can't work today. Susie Q's initial review specifically says, quote, everything is made by machines and some kind of esports mixer in the back. Robles, again, the only human character who works in the store. He comes out after Hans leaves and, quote, wordlessly preps the noodle table for the day's orders. And it's shown that he is essentially manning the cooking of the noodles for the entire day. And does it admirably. And so as I was reading this, I was like, ooh, here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. Someone's going to come inside and see Robles behind the counter making all the noodles, and they're going to take a picture and they're going to post it as a response online as a 5-star review saying, no, this place is fantastic. All these robophobes are lying like there are humans working here. This is a great place. You should come here. And I really felt like this was going to be commentary about ill-informed people jumping to something's defense online when they don't understand enough of the situation to understand that the way that they are defending it is still reinforcing the minor premise of that argument about, hey, it's bad that robots are working here. It's bad. And then the team would have to figure out how to cozily deal with that situation. Because of how the review and Robles taking control of the station is kind of right next to each other, I was really thinking, like, this is so clearly where the story is going. Unfortunately, not the case. It is forgotten about by the next chapter. A couple weeks go by between chapters normally. Nothing about Robles working the food counter is basically ever mentioned again. You can write the rest of the story that would have followed that in a very similar way to this one, with, I think, a lot more thematic meaning and payoff, and also commentary on our current social issues today in a way that is not this incredibly weak analog to immigration. It also would make the robots' realization that they don't need to use Grando Sando, that online algorithm thing, to sell their noodles, even stronger and more of a relevant message in today's society where more and more people are trying to remove themselves from social media. And especially in this, post-war messed up version of San Francisco, which has always been about countercultural resistance and, queer pride. It would have added to the dedication. It would have added to a bunch of different lenses that you can choose to interpret and read this book through. And it would have added a lot more thematic nuance to the good versus evil that is presented in this book. Because right now, the sides are the good people who are fine with robots making noodles and the evil people, the evil Americans specifically, who are against robots making noodles. And especially connected to that scene with Sweetie, it would have introduced that idea of humans requiring this adornment to the truth, to see it as the truth, instead of just accepting what is in front of them as truth. So as it stands, it seems like Robles was maybe a more last-minute addition to the story, especially considering the author's final sentences at the very, very end. They write, "And finally, R.I.P. to my old friend Steve Robles. Thanks for the chill vibes, my sweet bud," which is very sweet. I know nothing about the real relationship or interactions between Steve Robles and Annalee Newitz, and I'm not going to comment on anything like that, but I bet they were an awesome guy if they're anything like the book presents them as. The thanks for the chill vibes having some connection to him constantly hitting a weave pen might definitely make that a little bit more of a direct connection. It's tough when such a minor reframing in one scene or a reframing of the conflict could have added meaning. I'm not trying to say the immigration connection angle isn't meaning. I just think it's meaning that doesn't resonate. It's meaning that doesn't work, especially not, as I said, in this specific kairotic moment that we are living in right now. Instead, Robles just kind of feels like the reader, not in control, along for the ride, in awe of the robots, seeing the robots as humans who deserve this working out, seeing them like humans. Seeing them like humans. This is the other thing. For all of specifically Sweeties, but the minor premise being all of the robots, deserving a workspace of their own and love and support and care, all that stuff, like deserving that. For all of Sweetie's desire to be a robot and specifically not a human, especially in that whole interaction that we talked about earlier, the book does a hell of a job positioning all of these characters in the reader's minds as human. They have emotions, they have memories, they have PTSD, they have love and affection, they have trauma, they have dysphoria, they have rage against their past, they have hopes for their future. They are, in all intents and purposes, humans. And yet when push comes to shove, this book seems like it is trying to catch me out for thinking that these characters are in any way human. Beyond this scenario with Sweetie, Stay Behind's PTSD memory involves humans pulling him away from this collapsed tunnel where his robot comrades are laying, probably dead, but definitely dying, because he intrinsically understands that the humans see human life as more valuable than robot life. And he's upset about that because his friends died. The premise there is that robots are deserving of life. I mean, we want Stay Behind to stay alive, right? Like we would any human character. The self-driving car that the group commissions for some deliveries when they're not being done by, gig workers on Lime bikes in this neoliberal crypto-capitalist hell is consistently kind of waxing poetic and waxing theory about robophobia in human entertainment like Transformers. Sweetie asks Lemon if Lemon wants to set up a Skillshare for robots for like her tissue management practice, whatever it's called, textiles and tissues, set up a Skillshare in the restaurant after, human hours. It's not segregated like that, but you know what I mean. Robots don't need to eat. And Lemon causes Sweetie to feel shame because they're making this space centered toward humans and human needs because robots don't need to eat. And then basically immediately comes around when Sweetie says, no, actually, we're actually doing it because we want to do it and we think it's fun. Who cares that the only people benefiting from this are humans? We think it's good and it's self-actualizing to us, so actually it's our personal fulfillment. It doesn't matter that it's only built for humans. And Lemon's like, oh yeah, makes sense. The book even says, quote, Sweetie, as she spoke, could feel the truth crystallizing in her words. So, okay, why are we demanding this one type of human-like treatment and then self-othering when we get that treatment? I totally understand how there could be some commentary here about how, robots don't have to be like humans to have love and support, crazy analog here, but let's talk about immigration. Immigrants don't need to be like the dominant culture to deserve our love and support. Sure, absolutely get that. The problem is that immigrants are humans and these robots are robots. And I know that there's going to be some, techno-accelerationist who will say something along the lines of, actually, you saying something like, well, these people are humans and these other people are not humans is analogous to rhetoric used to dehumanize native populations and non-white populations over the years. I understand. I get that. In this day, in this year of 2026, are we really saying that robots AI, dominant culture, cryptocurrency, all kinds of stuff like that, have less rights than regular people, than immigrants. Everything in our society right now is built around AI. It is the dominant culture. There's nothing countercultural about raging for AI. Like, I understand this is crazy, but we can't be having Cayenne hop on the San Francisco blockchain to talk with a sentient contract that if it is severed, the contract will die, and have a throwaway line about this leaves the contract open for manipulation. And Cayenne like gets the contract to do what they want so that they can continue running the restaurant. I don't care if you want to make the argument that it's not manipulation. These robots are self-othering other robots from themselves while also othering themselves from humanity. What is the message here? There's also this very important scene where Hans and Cayenne and Stay Behind are going to a place called Jian Spices to watch a Chinese cook make these hand-pulled bang bang noodles. There's a big crowd of diverse humans there, and they head inside to talk with the cook, and Hans asks in Mandarin for secrets about cooking bang bang noodles and making the noodles. Like, how long do you let the dough rest? Hans's main experience is making flatbread. How do you make the dough chewy? Do you know where the name Bang Bang comes from? Etc. Like, questions like this. And so surprisingly, the cook is like completely down with answering all of these questions. And the cook even says as they leave, like, good luck with your noodles. They order a few different kinds of noodles and analyze them, with the book in particular going into detail about how Cayenne, quote, plunged his 5 tasting arms into the cumin loom, pulverizing the noodles and vegetable protein, analyzing the earthly aromatics at a molecular level. What I think is really interesting about this particular quotation about how Cayenne is actually analyzing it is that it is so unhuman. Pulverizing. I know our teeth pulverize, but we say chew. Noodles and vegetable protein, analyzing the earthly aromatics at a molecular level. We do that with taste buds, but we don't say it like analyzing at a molecular level. We say it tasting. Essentially what's happening here is that they're scientifically using really advanced technology that humans don't, I wouldn't say they don't have access to, but like this cook is just using their cultural knowledge to do this stuff. The robot is taking that cultural knowledge, dissecting everything about what makes these noodles good, and then these robots open up their own 5-star noodle shop that would be still 5-star if there wasn't a robophobic outcry against it, making the same type of noodle. How am I supposed to not see this as LLMs like scraping information and making it and it being fine? Actually, no, not being fine, being really good. Being so amazing and worth it that all the humans who tried are like, this is so good. I just can't help but notice that these robots went to a source of cultural knowledge, got a bunch of information they didn't know before, and immediately were able to make 5-star noodles, 5-star bang bang noodles. Not only that, but like make a restaurant that is directly in competition with Jian Spices, which they learned everything from. The funniest possible thing would be in the final chapter of this book, they drive past the store and it's just gone, like closed, out of business. There's too much new competition from Authentic Noodle. I read a section like that and I think about this book that has been written by Annalee Newitz, a science columnist, a nonfiction tech author, an author, and wonder how in the world Newitz was able to continue seeing this as a cozy story of AI meritocratism, even as AI continues to erode trust and quality kind of across the board, and particularly in the literary community, right? I wonder how they were able to see this as a story of, rising beyond bigotry in San Francisco of all places, and yet clearly miss the points that countercultural revolution, particularly in that area, made. As I said before, AI is not counterculture. AI is literally culture. AI is everywhere, whether we like it or not. It's being pushed on us all the time, and we don't like it. I don't know if I can say people who love just reading don't like AI, but people who like reading good stuff and reading authors who care about writing and reading authors who want to, project a message into the world like Annalee Newitz so clearly does, we don't like AI. So I don't know how this is supposed to be cozy or feel good or make me feel anything other than, no, not this future, please, God, no, not this, no. So I checked out Newitz's Instagram to see kind of what kind of messaging they were doing with the rollout and promotion of this book. So here's one of them celebrating the 2 books that they published in 2025 with the quote, "Automatic Noodle is my love letter to San Francisco's future. I'm incredibly grateful that I'm able to continue publishing weird, queer, hopeful science fiction about people fighting for worker rights and community sovereignty." Worker rights? Worker rights. Newitz also had an interview with Bioneers, which is this nonprofit organization that focuses on, quote, "visionary solutions for the world's most pressing environmental and social challenges." In the interview, they say that, quote, "We've all heard the idea of a feel-good story, but there are also feel-bad stories. And that's what we're talking about when we get into the realm of propaganda and stories that exploit people." By no means do I think Authentic Noodle is directly exploiting people. I don't think that's the case, but I do think it is a type of propaganda. If Newitz is drawing this distinction between feel-good and feel-bad stories and heavily marketing their new book as a feel-good story, why does it feel so bad when I start lifting up the corner of the rug? Perhaps actually, even more importantly, why are there so many people able to take this as a feel-good story at face value in 2026? Ignore all these glaring issues of, cryptocurrency being this good thing and LLMs being this good thing and taking cultural knowledge to regurgitate it as robots being this good thing. Is it really just because they are the protagonists? They're the people we should be rooting for? Oh man, I'm so happy this immigrant was able to get around the government's discrimination by using this very helpful cryptocurrency. Oh man, I'm so happy that our robots have a successful food operation after directly lifting everything they knew about it from someone who was making it by hand themselves using human techniques and knowledge. Hell yeah, cozy. I'm so happy Stay Behind is still in the chat with the evil Americans plotting the countercultural insurgency to keep tabs on their evil, robophobic ways. If you want to write about immigration and the struggles that immigrants face in a culture that just greatly disregards them on both sides of the aisle, write about immigration. Just write about immigration. If you wanted to make a cozy sci-fi story, something needed to change here. I think an editor should have caught that this was not, as a whole, the presentation that works with this. This was just not it. And it sucks because I feel like it definitely could have been it. I feel like it could have been it. It's short, it's sweet, it has a fine writing style, it's breezy, it's nice to read. It just simply does not have a thematic core that I can work with, that I can actually believe, that I can suspend my disbelief about cryptocurrencies and LLMs and in writing specifically to love. And it just didn't hit its marks. But I don't know. I'm just a guy. What do you think? I guess I'm running a book channel now. Have you checked out this book? Am I completely off base? I don't know. I love talking about stuff. I just felt like I needed to get some ideas out there into the world. And I would love to keep this conversation going in the comments. I've already tried to get a number of my friends to read this so that I can figure out what's going on here and if I'm wildly off base. If I'm wildly off base, please tell me. It'd be very helpful. Peace.